Hi, I'm Gidon from thetechnologyman.com. The AC200P from Bluetti, or PowerOak in the UK, is the most powerful portable power station I've tested so far. It has a massive 2000 watt-hour lithium iron phosphate battery and a 2000 watt AC inverter that can power large power-hungry devices like heaters, coffee machines, mitre saws and even an electric lawnmower. Or it can power smaller items for hours on end. These power stations are perfect for power cuts, camping, travel and festivals. And the AC200P can charge it up to 700 watts off solar panels alone when mains isn't available. These things aren't cheap. You can see the current price if you follow the link down below, but I'll run through its capabilities and thoroughly test all its claims to help you decide if this is the right power station for you. So let's take a closer look. The AC200P comes in a huge box weighing 37 kilograms. A lot of care has been taken with the packaging, with a strong outer box with reinforced edges. I found it easiest to open both the outer and inner box and lift the power station out of the inner box. As well as the power station, there's one of the largest AC adapters I've come across, and an assortment of charging cables, including an XT90 to aviation plug, a car charging cable again with an XT90 connector on one end, and an MC4 to XT90 solar charging cable. I'll discuss all these accessories shortly. These cables can be stored in the supplied drawstring bag. It does the job, but I would have expected something a little more premium for the price of this power station. There's also a user manual and warranty card. The power station is well built, made from a mixture of polycarbonate and flame retardant ABS. It feels tough, but there's no rubber bumper like on the smaller AC50S I reviewed a while back, and it'll be easy to scuff the shiny lighter grey trim. And like every power station I've reviewed so far, there's no weatherproof rating, but all the ports do have rubber flaps that will at least offer some protection. The power station is portable, but only just, weighing in at 26.9 kilograms, and the AC charger is an additional 1.4 kilograms with its mains lead. This is not something you'll be wanting to move around too often. You can see the dimensions of the power station and charger on screen. You can just about lift it with one hand, but generally it needs two hands. This is the first power station I've tested which uses the lithium iron phosphate battery. These batteries do weigh more than the usual lithium iron batteries I'm used to, but they offer several advantages that more than make up for the extra weight. Most importantly, they last longer. Bluetti claims the unit will maintain 80% capacity after 3,500 charge-discharge cycles. That's around 5 times more than the typical 500 cycles of standard lithium-ion batteries. They also use a more stable and therefore safer chemistry, and they're more environmentally friendly too, since they don't use cobalt or nickel. The AC200P has a capacity of 2,000 watt-hours and has an impressive 2,000 watt AC inverter which can surge to 4,800 watts. Unfortunately, the battery is not replaceable. On their website, Bluetti provides some examples of what you could run off this power station and how long for, but I'll cover some real life examples shortly when I discuss its performance. The left side of the power station has two charging inputs. The left input with the aviation port is for charging from your car's 12 volt output or solar panels. The right port has a 7.9mm DC jack for use with the included mains charger. Above the ports is a fan that sucks in cool air. This cool air passes over the battery and electronics, and there's an exhaust fan on the right side of the unit to expel this warmed up air. From the top left on the front of the unit, there's the aluminium power button. A short press turns the unit on and a long press turns it off. Then there's a 12 volt 10 amp car cigarette outlet, the 10.8cm touchscreen display, and two 230 volt 2000 watt pure sine wave AC outlets. The US version has 6 110 volt AC outlets. Even with our oversized UK plugs, it would have been nice to have at least 1 or 2 extra outlets. And the rubber flaps can interfere with some larger plugs. This UK version is branded PowerOak for some reason, in the US it's branded Bluetti. Underneath the power button is a 12 volt 25 amp DC output, which isn't something I've seen before. But you need the optional aviation to XT60 cable to use it, which I did purchase. Then there are two 12 volt 3 amp DC 5525 outputs, a 60 watt USB Type-C power delivery output, and 4 5 volt 3 amp USB ports. It's disappointing not to see a 100 watt power delivery output here for more power hungry devices, and it also would have been nice if you could charge via this port too, like you can with the AllPower's 500 watt unit I reviewed recently. The USB-A outputs are a little basic too. They don't support any of the newer fast charging standards, only Qualcomm Quick Charge 2.0 at 5 volt. Unlike nearly every power station I've reviewed, there's no torch on this unit. I would have liked a floodlight like on the smaller AC50S, and looking around the power station there appears to be plenty of space to include one. But there are two useful 15 watt Qi wireless charging pads on top of the unit. The LCD touchscreen can show a wealth of information. The home screen shows remaining battery charge in the middle graphically and as a percentage. The top row shows the date and time, and below that the left field labelled PV for photovoltaic car displays the input from solar panels or your car's DC output. and the right field shows input from the mains charger. The next row shows current DC and AC usage in watts, and the DC and AC icons at the bottom have to be tapped to turn on and off DC and AC outputs respectively. Most of the units I've tested recently show you how long you have left, either to charge the unit or discharge the unit based on the current input or output wattage. Unfortunately, you don't get that with the AC200P, so you have to do the maths yourself. But if you tap on any of the input or output icons, you do get detailed information, which is particularly useful when charging with solar panels, which I'll come back to. Under settings, you can switch between 50Hz and 60Hz, change the DC input from solar to car, toggle eco mode, and change the display language. With eco mode on, the unit will shut off the AC power after 4 hours if the output is less than 50 watts. I'd recommend turning this off if you want to run anything lower powered that you want to stay on, like a phone charger or a low powered fridge. If you tap on next, you can switch the beeping off and configure the date and time. It's useful to have this set correctly for the fault logging. Under data, you can see the system temperature at the top. Product info shows the system information, and inverter and charger info shows the same information you get tapping the respective icons on the home screen. Then there's information on the battery management system under BMS maintenance and a fault log under fault history. Finally, there's a faults tab which highlights orange if any faults have been triggered. This defines the 55 different fault codes and will show any currently recorded faults with an orange check. Unfortunately, there's no app to monitor or control the unit, which would have been particularly useful outdoors, but the display is very hard to see, especially in bright sunlight. The small font used on the home screen doesn't help matters. There are three main ways to charge the AC200P: using the supplied mains charger, using the supplied car charging cable off your car's 12-volt cigarette lighter output, or using solar panels, which you'll have to purchase separately. If you have mains handy, the simplest and most likely quickest way to charge the AC200P is with the AC adapter. This adapter can charge the unit at up to 470 watts or 58.8 volts at 8 amps, so a full charge will take around 4 to 5 hours. The adapter uses a standard kettle lead and there's a fan to keep it cool that runs continuously, even after the power station reaches full charge, and it's quite noisy. The display did show just under 470 watts, and if you tap on the adapter icon, you can see the operating voltage and current too. The adapter uses the same 7909 7.9mm plug that Jackery uses, but after checking with my bench power supply, you need at least 55 volts output, so I can't use the Jackery 1000's 180 watt 24 volt charger, unfortunately. The charging speed is decent, but I would have preferred direct mains charging, like you get on the EcoFlow River Max I reviewed recently, which does away with the need for the AC adapter. To charge using your car's 12 volt outlet, you need to change the DC input from PV for solar to car under settings. Under this input, you can charge up to 8.2 amps in the range 11.5 volts to 14.4 volts and 23 volts to 28.8 volts. You need to use a supplied aviation plug to XT90 adapter and then plug the car charging lead into this. I've not seen this aviation plug before, and it is a secure and robust connection, but personally I'd have preferred a standard XT90 input built into the unit, which I've always found plenty secure enough and is far more common. I got the full 8.2 amps off the car outlet on the EcoFlow River Max, which at 13.5 volts equates to around 110 watts. This would charge the unit from flat in around 14 to 18 hours. I also tested this input with the bench power supply. With a 24 volt supply, you can get just under 200 watts in this port, again at 8.2 amps. Switching back to PV mode, I tested charging via solar. You must remember to switch back to this mode, otherwise you'll get an over voltage fault. Using the AC200P as a solar generator is one of its greatest strengths. It can support an input voltage from 35 volts all the way up to 150 volts, with a maximum current of 12 amps, and there's a built-in MPPT controller for more efficient solar charging. With enough solar panels and good enough conditions, you can charge the unit at a maximum of 700 watts, which is very impressive. That can make it possible to charge the unit off solar alone in 3 to 4 hours. Unfortunately, the minimum input voltage of 35 volts means that in most cases you'll need at least 2 solar panels connected in series, which increases the voltage whilst the current remains constant. If your solar panels have MC4 connectors, it's easy connecting them in series. You plug the XT90 to MC4 cable into the aviation to XT90 adapter. Then for 2 panels, you connect one solar panel's red cable to this cable's red cable, and the other panel's black cable to this cable's black cable. Then the 2 loose red and black connectors to each other to complete the circuit. It's hard to go wrong since the MC4 male and female connectors can only pair with each other. You can add further solar panels in exactly the same way, starting off with the 2 panels at the end of the array and then matching male and female connectors for the other panels. Bluetti recommends a minimum of 3 of their 120 watt SP120 or 2 of their 200 watt SP200 solar panels, but you can use whatever you have from any manufacturer. I've not tried them, but this pair of panels on Amazon should work and are pretty cheap if you don't need a portable solution. And they're more weatherproof than most portable panels. Initially I connected together a Bluetti SP120 120W panel, an All Powers SP120 100W panel, and EcoFlow's 160W panel. On a day with sunny spells in April in the UK, I got a maximum of just under 280 watts off this setup. If you tap on the PV icon, you can see the voltage was around 60 volts and I was getting around 4.5 to 5 amps. So if the conditions stayed the same, that configuration would take around 8 hours to fully charge the power station from flat. The Bluetti SP120 panel actually failed during this test. A crack suddenly appeared on one of the cells. I contacted their support, who offered a replacement without any quibble, but couldn't offer any explanation of what might have happened. When this replacement arrived, I used it together with 2 more SP120s to see how 3 of these panels compared to my original setup. I got around 250 watts, although with better conditions and more room to arrange the panels, I'm sure I could get this higher. When the sun went behind the clouds, this dropped to around 170 watts. I briefly reviewed the SP120 panels in my video on the AC50S, so please take a look at that if you want more information. I also plan to do a roundup of all the solar panels I've accumulated. The AC200P will be useful to compare them, so look out for that video, hopefully coming soon. I'll add a link on screen and down below if it's already out. I did try just one panel, and although you can see its voltage on the power station, you won't get anything from it. 2 panels provided around 40 volts and was enough to charge the unit. I did try switching again to car as the input source and connecting one panel via this input, since its range appears to cover the output of one solar panel. But although it recognised its input with the voltage displayed, the power station still didn't charge. I tried this with the Bluetti SP120 and the All Powers and EcoFlow panels. Again, looking into this with my bench power supply, it looks like this input needs 8 amps of current to charge the unit, so in bright enough conditions with the right single panel, you might get this to work. You can use both the car PV input and the mains input at the same time, so with enough solar panels and using mains, you could charge the AC200P from completely flat in under 2 hours at just under 1200 watts. You could also purchase a second mains adapter and a DC7909 to XT90 cable to use both inputs simultaneously off mains. Even using the 24 volt car charging input at 200 watts, I was able to speed up charging considerably. And although I don't have a second mains charger, I did use my bench power supply to charge it together with the mains charger at just under 1000 watts. I tested the 12 volt DC outputs with an electronic load tester from Kunking, the KP184. I'll have a link down below if you want to test your power station. All these ports are regulated so their output won't decrease as the battery level depletes. You need to turn on the DC subsystem by tapping on the DC icon on the home screen. Starting with a 12 volt 10 amp standard car outlet, I wound up the current to the full 10 amps without any issues. The output on the LCD was around 135 watts. As I went over the 10 amps, the voltage dropped and then the DC output shut off with a DC output short circuit fault, not the overcurrent fault I would have expected. As a more practical example, I charged the EcoFlow River Max off this car outlet with just under 110 watts displayed. Moving on to the two 12 volt 3 amp DC 5525 ports, I was able to increase the current to its 3 amp limit, around 40 watts on the display, but anything over did result in an overcurrent fault and the DC shut off. If the DC shuts off, you can tap on the DC icon to turn it off and then back on again. If the AC shuts off, it won't let you turn it back on again by tapping the AC icon. You'll need to power off the unit with the power button and then turn it back on again and then tap on the AC icon again. I also tried plugging in a 12 volt LED light strip and a smart battery charger, which both worked fine. The last 12 volt output is not something I've seen before. It can deliver up to 25 amps or around 300 watts, but it has an aviation plug socket, so you need a special cable to connect anything, and this isn't included. I didn't find the cable easy to get hold of either, and it took a while to arrive. It has a female receptacle unlike the male receptacle on the charging port, so you can't just use that cable unfortunately. The cable I ordered has an XT60 connector on the other end, and the first thing I tried was using it as a DC power supply for my Hota D6 Plus RC car LiFePO charger. This charger is able to draw up to 650 watts off DC, and I can easily max out the 25 amp port charging two 4S LiFePO batteries. It should be more efficient running DC devices directly off DC rather than converting to AC and then back again. With the load tester, it ran happily at the full 25 amps, drawing over 320 watts according to the LCD display, although I did find the cable started to get a little warm. I did keep increasing the current all the way to just over 28 amps when the unit shut off with an overcurrent fault, but after around 26 amps the voltage started to drop anyway. Moving on to the USB ports, which are also operated under the DC subsystem, the USB-C 60 watt port supports USB power delivery at up to 20 volts and 3 amps and will power even decent sized laptops and lots of other tech. As I mentioned earlier, I would have expected 100 watts like on the EcoFlow for more power hungry devices like the latest MacBook Pros, and I'd have preferred an extra USB-C port even if it sacrificed a couple of the standard USB ports. But it's still plenty for many devices like this Chromebook, and I was able to draw the full 60 watt charging the Allpower's 500 watt power station. The 4 USB-A ports are still useful, and testing them with a load tester I was able to get over the spec 3 amps before the voltage started to drop. The AC outlets are really what you purchase a unit like this for. With its built-in 2000 watt inverter, which will support a brief surge of 4800 watts, this is the most powerful unit I've tested to date. I confirmed their pure sine wave output, which is important for sensitive electronics with a graphical multimeter. I needed to find some fairly hefty equipment to really put this inverter to the test. I started off mowing the lawn with this 1500 watt Flymo lawnmower, which worked fine. My Bosch 1800 watt sliding mitre saw cutting thick oak didn't overload the power station either, despite peaking at just under 3000 watts. I could also run a 1.1 kilowatt portable compressor, but my larger workshop compressor was too much and triggered the inverter overload fault, which isn't surprising since it trips its 13 amp fuse in cold weather. I had the same issue with other stationary woodworking machinery in my workshop. My table saw, planer thicknesser and bandsaw all trip the AC200P. Even though they're all 2 kilowatts or less, they have induction motors which can draw over 5 times that when they start up, which is more than the 4800 watt surge the AC200P is capable of. But it handled almost every handheld machine I tried, including a powerful 2000 watt router. In the house I could run both an espresso coffee machine and frother simultaneously, and I could run a 2 kilowatt heater. I also tried running a 4-slot toaster, which was at the limit of the power station, drawing just over 2000 watts. The AC200P can deliver over 2000 watts and under 2500 watts for up to 2 minutes, but will beep continuously to warn you and then does shut off when the 2 minutes is up. A kettle was a little too much for it, running at just over 2500 watts before overloading the power station. But a 1550 watt hairdryer ran fine, and I couldn't find many more household items that would overload the unit, so it could prove very useful in a power cut. Unlike the EcoFlow, this AC200P doesn't have a UPS function, where it can run off mains directly and then switch to battery in the event of a power outage. But it does support pass-through charging, so you could use it in a similar fashion to power essential items whilst plugged into the mains, and then the fully charged battery would power these items if the power goes out. This wouldn't be ideal longer term for battery health, but I used it like this to plug in all my broadband and Wi-Fi equipment when we were having regular power cuts recently. This may well depend on ambient temperatures, but the unit is almost silent, up to around 1000 watts, when the fan kicks in. Measuring with a decibel meter 1 meter away, I measured around 36 dB background noise, which dumped to around 42 dB when the fans first turned on. When you get over around 1400 watts, the fans increased in volume to a much more noticeable 52 dB. But it's good to know you could have it running lower power devices overnight, camping or in a camper van without hearing the power station. Although I couldn't see any way of turning off the display or the green LED circling the power button when the unit is on, which could be distracting if you're sleeping nearby. And with no accompanying app, this is not a feature that can simply be added as a firmware update. Finally, I measured the capacity of the unit both using DC and AC. The claimed capacity is 2000 watt hours, but the manual does state that the depth of discharge is 10%. So the unit will power off with 10% of battery remaining to protect the battery. Also taking into account the efficiency of the unit, which the manual specifies as 88%, we should be able to get at least 2000 times 0.9 times 0.88, which equals 1584 watt hours of usable capacity. First I ran the test off DC with a load tester set at 15 amps connected to the 12 volt 25 amp port. The capacity of the battery is displayed on the Kunkin load tester in watt hours, but the display resets back to 0 at 1000 watt hours, so you can see the final measured capacity is 1544 watt hours, which is very close to the value we estimated. I also measured the capacity with an AC load running a 2 kilowatt heater at half power at around 970 watts. I used an energy monitoring plug and measured 1904 watt hours. We should get less capacity under AC due to inverter losses, so I imagine the monitoring plug is overestimating usage. I did try with another energy monitoring plug and this time got 1808 watts, but this still seems high. These measurements are useful to compare to other portable power stations I've tested, but the electronic load tester provides the most accurate measurement, so I'd consider 1544 watt hours the true capacity of the unit. During both these tests, I ran both a DC 25 amp and 2000 watt AC outlets at full power for 20 minutes to check if the power station was capable of running at its full rated DC and AC outputs continuously, which it was. I also checked the temperature of the unit under this heavy load with a Flir thermal imaging camera, and the power station remained remarkably cool. The AC200P is the most powerful power station I've tested so far. will power most household items quite happily, and it even ran some pretty heavy machinery in my workshop. It's worth remembering though that at its maximum 2000 watt output, the sizable 2000 watt hour battery will still only last just under an hour. I'm pleased to finally test a power station with a lithium iron phosphate battery, which should last a lot longer than your standard lithium ion battery. I can't confirm the battery's longevity, but in my capacity tests it fared well, at least in line with Bluetti's claims. Although the battery isn't replaceable and it does contribute to the weight of this power station. It is very heavy, which is a real consideration if you need to move this around a lot. The touchscreen shows a wealth of technical information, but it's not particularly user-friendly and there's some basic information missing, like an estimate of remaining usage time based on current output. There's also no accompanying app, which would have been particularly useful considering how difficult it is to read the screen outdoors. The most impressive feature of the AC200P is its charging capabilities, particularly off solar. I didn't have enough solar panels or sun to realise its 700 watt maximum input off solar, but being able to mix and match whatever solar panels you have make it very flexible. You could start with 2 or 3 panels and add more panels over time. It's just a shame that you'll typically need at least 2 panels to satisfy the power station's minimum voltage requirements. Mains charging is reasonably quick, but it'd be faster and more convenient if you could charge directly off mains without an adapter, like you can with EcoFlow's range. And the included mains adapter is very large and noisy. Overall, I'd have no trouble recommending the AC200P. The only power station that I have that comes close in spec to the AC200P is a Jackery Explorer 1000. This has around half the output and capacity and has more modest features, but it's far more portable at almost a third of the weight of the Bluetti. It really depends on what you need to run, what features you need and how much you can spend, although none of these power stations are cheap. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you have the AC200P, what do you think of it? Or if there's another power station you want me to test, let me know. And as always, if you have any questions, please ask. I read every comment and will do my best to respond. I do hope you found this video useful. Please like the video if you did. I'm releasing videos every week on the latest technology and how to get the most out of it, so please make sure you subscribe. And don't forget to tap the bell icon if you want to get notified as soon as a new video gets uploaded. Thanks for watching.